So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to have Rod McKenzie among us. I had the pleasure the privilege to have dinner yesterday, and he was already sending messages. What would you say, or what would be your opinion, and talking about the heavy program he is spending with our students for these 3 or 4 days this week. Now, the group and the invitation for today follows a new model from Herwald Volk, and the intention of these 3 next hours will be to have some sort of input talk from our guest, in this case Rod McKenzie, to have a variety of high competent and persons in a small crisis, and our intention is, of course, to have heavy discussions afterwards. I had the privilege to be present already for 3 from these 4 evenings, and I can assure it was very interesting. So, welcome, Rod.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you, and our guests, of course, the same way. And I thank you for organizing this evening.
Yes,
thank
I
you very
also
much.
want to address some words. Also from my side, a very warm welcome to you, and especially a very warm welcome to you, Rod, our 2 days keynote speaker. I cannot introduce him as good as he could do himself, but I try very brief. He's a professional journalist. He held several positions as an editor in broadcasting. Actually, he is head of development in local radio at the BBC, and he won several very prestigious Radio Academy Awards, or also known as Sony Radio Awards, in his impressive career. Today he will address to us the well-known fact of eroding audience in the old media broadcasting caused by new media, and of course this all we know, but his input will be what strategies held the BBC against it, or tried to held against it, or experimented to held against this eroding audience in broadcasting. But before we start, a few words on this new format, Medien.Lounge, and what we try to achieve with it, with this kind of event, especially for those guests not attending. Those attending the second time already heard that this commercial on our own behalf. First of all, we want to show our closeness with you, with the media industry, by thus saying thanks to you for your cooperation with us. You give a lot to us and our students. For example, giving lectures, giving your experience to our students, taking part at the podium in panel discussions, being part of expert teams in developing new curricula, or refreshing or renewing existing curricula. You provide internships to our students, so you do a lot of us. You spend your experience and your time for us and our students. And by this way, with the Medien.Lounge, we want to give something back to you, and the way we want to give something back to you will always be an international keynote speaker, always addressing topics, interesting topics related to the future of the media industry. Then there is a second reason also, which a more ulterior motif or hidden motif behind. When you are searching for or hiring media technicians or media management juniors, you hopefully remember what efforts we do in the internationalization of our educational program here at the Fachhochschule in St. Pölten. So by showing this to you, We hope you remember that. You hopefully remember that when you hire juniors, that we have international educated students here. It's always, we try to have those international hotshots in our programs. We hire them for education for our students before we let them go on you. And with let them go on you, I mean the hotshots today, and of course the students when they're finished with their program. This was the acoustic signal, the necessary acoustic signal for ending the commercial break in our own behalf. So before I pass over to Rod, I want to do some acknowledgements. A special thanks to Lisa for her organizational efforts for this event. A special thanks to Klaus Temper for his technical support. He's always there when needed. He's always present when needed. To our cameraman Philip, and last but not least to Alois Frochnik. He's the academic director and head of the department Media Technology, and by us he's the host of this video studio. And thank you for allowing and providing this fine setting for a Medien.Lounge. Rod, we all look forward for your keynote, and I'm sure we will have a very lively discussion afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Okay, well thank you very much, and it's good to see you all here tonight. Food is there, so if you want to stock up, that would be a good time. That's what I'm going to address in terms of the topic, because I think digital disruption is so big, so massive to established broadcasters that it's very difficult to kind of cover in the time that I have the damage that's going on, the disruption that's going on out there to us as kind of established broadcasters. But of course, at the end, you know, you might want to take the discussion away from local, and feel free to do that, because it's a start point. We just really kind of need to understand a little bit about what's going on. So I'll pause again. Still no rush for the smoked salmon, or indeed the beer. But if you want to go, feel free. Okay, so let's start. Well, 79 years ago this week, my father entered the business in which he's not alive anymore, and now I worked for our entire lives. The world of journalism he encountered as a junior copy boy, aged 15 in the Aberdeen Bon Accord, no longer exists. The paper doesn't exist. This was the world, of course, before TV, where radio was a rarity, entirely in the hands, in Britain, of the BBC, with a mission for the greater good of Britain, but absolutely no hint of populism or giving the people what they wanted. This was a world of communities in Britain, where localness mattered. Did the local paper print your name right? Did they mention that your entry had won the prize in the fete, that one of their relatives had died? Was the obituary for them appropriate and respectful? London, Berlin, Paris, New York, Vienna, seemingly a million miles away from those communities we're talking about in Britain, and of no great relevance to people's lives then. Well, as we all know, war came along, the world changed, the world rebuilt, TV became king, the internet arrived, and local papers started to die. In the UK, in the last few years, an estimated quarter of all the journalists in local newsrooms have lost their jobs. Hundreds have had to go from local radio stations and regional TV, including at the BBC, often cited as a very well-funded public broadcaster. Nowadays, to many teenagers, local is Los Angeles, Hollywood, instantly connected in a multi-screen, multi-device world. And that might have been how some of us might have viewed the radio 30, 40 years ago, devotedly listening to your favourite radio station, enjoying your music, finding out about new bands, enjoying pop culture. kind of the way things were. It was quite comfortable. He didn't have any cool headphones with logos on. He was just listening to his radio. This was the radio station which became the nation's favourite in Britain, BBC Radio 1. That picture was taken in 1967. You can tell that it was 1967 because all the DJs are wearing suits and ties, because everyone did in those days. And I put the picture up because, unbelievably, that radio station attracted half of all the people in Britain as listeners. Now, what radio station could do that now? 50% of the entire population of the country listen to one radio station. Now, what happened then was that commercial radio came along and started to disrupt, and I'll keep using that word, disrupt, the kind of comfortable position that the BBC and later others were in. And this is the modern disruption. Those figures are changing and exponentially going up all the time. And she is living the sort of life that our new audiences, and increasingly as they grow older, our slightly older audiences enjoy. Multi-screen, multi-device, multitask. Forget one screen, it's really 4 screens and maybe more. In the UK, 24 million people are using Facebook. And when you look at the average clicks that they're checking a day, and these, by the way, Facebook is declining in the UK, you can see again the degree of disruption on the time available for broadcasters to have an audience. And I think that probably says it all. And this is the kind of screen, the 4-screen world that we're inhabiting. You know, I don't need to tell you it's no different in Austria. And it's a really, really big issue for us. So where does local fit in? Can it survive? And what about national broadcasters and the push and pull they feel between going local on the one hand and catering for celebrity-obsessed, picture-hungry consumers? Firstly, I think the pessimism about local journalism is massively overdone. All around us we see outstanding reporting, impressive innovation and wise investments reinventing local journalism in the UK. And the simple fact is this: it's what people want. The BBC's biggest audience for TV news are for the regional bulletins. Yep, you heard that right, the regional bulletins. Roughly 5 million people tune in each night for the 6 o'clock news on BBC One. By 6:30, when we roll out our regional bulletins in England and the news for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, that number is closer to 6 million people. We share a belief in local journalism because we have a similar outlook on news, because we have an unshakable optimism about making it work, and because we know it's what viewers, listeners and readers really want. Fewer journalists, though, and this goes back to my point at the beginning, does not mean less news, it means more press releases. Press releases written up as news, overstretched journalists not having the time to make verification calls, or even more simply just to think about what this story does or doesn't tell me. What questions should I ask? Is there another side? This means, I think, a society in which the decisions of powerful people go unreported and unchallenged, undermining any belief in local democracy and institutions, a big problem in the UK, public services and private businesses. The BBC is not to be blamed for the problems in regional newspaper business, by the way. It's Facebook, Google, Zoopla and Gumtree that have done for the classified advertising market, and all the consequences that followed from that in terms of newspaper revenue and jobs. Indeed, when countries where internet penetration has been higher and faster than in the UK, and there is no BBC, there's no public service, the impact on the regional press has been as, if not more, disastrous and severe. Nor can we expect the BBC to be the remedy to local newspapers' problems in the UK. The assault on the business models of the local press is not the BBC's fault, I'm afraid. The organisation I work for will therefore not be able to fix the problem. The BBC has a very real stake in the success of local and regional news businesses. This is true in principle because local audiences are going to get closer to what's really going on where they live, when journalists are competing to break stories, when there's a variety of different ideas and opinions in the media, and when the media itself is subject to media scrutiny. And it's true in practice. BBC Local Radio, regional TV and all that we're doing online, on mobile and on social media draws every day on stories, ideas and opinions out there in the papers, commercial radio and rival TV stations on blogs and vlogs, Facebook and Twitter streams. As we all know, the traffic goes both ways. The press in all its forms equally feeds off what the BBC puts out there. We've launched a pilot in Leeds in Yorkshire to see how the BBC Online can make more of local newspapers' stories and digital content to our audiences online. We're collaborating with citizen journalist teams such as the Real Whitby. In Birmingham, we've been trying to make available BBC video and audio content to local newspaper websites, extending both our reach, and a similar scheme is running in the northeast of England. So how does it feel if you work in the local press in England? The editor of one local paper told that while readership numbers are dwindling, the appetite for local information is not. They may not be reading his paper, but they are checking his website. They're checking local social media and hyperlocal websites, which drill much deeper into communities and provide even greater localness than even the best local radio or TV papers can do. Now, I think that's an encouraging sign. To be smart in today's media landscape, you have to be fleet of foot. So we turn to digital and digital strategies. Twitter and Google are demonstrating daily how they can be news gatherers, providers of data journalism and sources of breaking news for the rest of us. Google Trends is a fascinating glimpse into this world. Twitter talk of their news compass, which covers everything from finding stories, verification to distribution. And then there's BuzzFeed. In just 8 years, BuzzFeed has developed a bigger audience than BBC News and BBC Worldwide internationally. And that's no mean feat, because the BBC is big internationally. A recent report commissioned by the BBC concluded that BBC News punches well below its weight digitally. Our web presence lacks character and personality, that it has a neutral tone of a news bulletin compared with the vigour and vibrancy of digital rivals. Ouch. That hurts. We're old-fashioned. We're out of date. Are we dying? Now, the challenge for the BBC is to add character and personality to its offering. That's not something the BBC has ever been very good at. Take you back to my earlier remarks about how the BBC was born in an age of telling people what was good for them. You know, the 1920s and the 30s, a very kind of authoritarian age in Britain, where we told working class people what was culture and expected them to enjoy it, or at least pay attention. So this is not impossible. Parts of the BBC, notably the youth-focused Newsbeat, which I used to work for, and Newsround sites, have learnt how to write to and appeal to their target audience by understanding it and making the impact, writing and visualisation, crucially, relevant and compelling to their young audiences. Today's journalists, it's often said, needs to be a multimedia animal, tweeting a breaking line, gathering stills and video for a visual package, maybe TV, but maybe just as likely to be YouTube, capable of supplying audio content for radio on sites like Audio Boom, and then following up with a blog or an online piece richly decorated with great stills. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. Most wannabe journalists spilling out of the UK and US journalism colleges are hungry for this sort of exposure. Some of the older, more experienced hands back in the newsroom, you may have a few, are not. Change is scary. Its pace is quickening all the time. The challenges are growing. The skill set is expanding exponentially. Fundamentally, this is an absolutely key point. All broadcasters need to understand that they must shift from putting traditional broadcasting first to putting mobile first. Now, I'm just going to switch over to one of our big competitive sites. Okay, so is there anything we can learn from others? This is the Mail Online. The Mail Online far dwarfs the reach and readership of its older and very famous UK parent newspaper, the Daily Mail. It has a monthly audience of 150 million. It's less than BuzzFeed, but its mix, as you can probably tell from that headline story, is a pretty heady, brash one. At least as brash as BuzzFeed with its lists of things that people do and don't do. It's got plenty of pictures, especially of celebrities. Scrolling down the page, you'll see more of, you'll never see more than a few lines of text before another big, brash picture hits you. And it's famous for its so-called sidebar of shame, which everyone enjoys reading, but almost no one will admit to reading. It's a grouping of a right-hand column. I might be able to show you in a bit, but on this screen it's kind of grouped up in a slightly different way. And they're typically showbiz stories involving sex, varying degrees of nakedness, drugs, and just general showbiz malarkey. So you're getting a bit of a flavour of the sidebar of shame coming up here. We've got a story about this bisexual Asian guy who's allegedly murdered his wife in South Africa, and that trial is continuing. This is the sidebar of shame, this is about a reality TV show. It doesn't matter, you can't see it, but you get a flavour of what this is all about. A former Playboy playmate and a veteran BBC newsreader. The lineup of I'm a Celebrity revealed. Jerry Halliwell, who used to be in the Spice Girls, shows off her diamond engagement ring for the first time. Kelly Brook, story about her, and so on and so forth. It's got tremendous appeal. It doesn't look like the BBC. The BBC is serious and boring. These are the kind of digital disruptors that are difficult for us. And then if we move to slightly more upmarket, The Guardian. Now, The Guardian's done very well digitally. It doesn't terribly like the BBC because it thinks the BBC is effectively offering a free online service, and The Guardian, like some of the other newspapers in the UK, would like to charge. But at the moment they have a business model which works. It's quite serious news, but they have learnt to put their website first, not the paper. So no longer do people say, oh, you've got to write the story for the paper, it's got to get in the morning edition. No, write it for the website first. And that, becoming a digital first organisation for The Guardian, really was a massive thing for them. And it puts digital at the heart of our strategy. So going back to what I was saying about you've got to put digital first, there's kind of further proof of it. The other organisation which has been disruptive to us increasingly is Vice News, it's again, it does some very high quality journalism, but it's got bags of impact, and it knows how to use pictures as well. I was talking to some of the students in the college earlier today, and one of the things that surprised me is the extent to which they don't understand how powerful pictures can drive website traffic. They're quite modest about their ambitions in terms of pictures. Keep it sexy. The sexier, the better. So the business model is easy to understand. As print sales fall, revenues shrink. So therefore, monetizing a digital future breathes new life into us aging media beasts. So what does this kind of open journalism mean? What can you learn from it? So for the BBC in the UK, editorial content, we're now thinking of ways that we can collaborate with local or ultra-local and how we can link in. And I don't mean that in the business sense, and network with the rest of the web. It also raises questions of verification. Who is the editor? A relinquishing of editorial control, at least in part. So let's just tackle some of those issues. Firstly, I've talked about verification. Is it true? We know audiences value accuracy, perhaps pretty much above everything else. But do we, in our smaller world, have the time to check stories out if they're supplied by bloggers or citizen journalists? And how does the Huffington Post operate, for example? Truth has never been an essential ingredient of viral content on the internet, but in the stepped-up competition for readers, digital news sites are increasingly blurring the line between fact and fiction, and saying it's all part of doing business in the rough and tumble world of online journalism. Several recent stories rocketed around the web, picking up millions of views, but turned out to be fake or embellished. A Twitter tale of a Thanksgiving feud on a plane, which is here. I won't, again, it's not something you need to kind of know about. Some of you may, but this involved this guy, Elon Gale, tweeting that his flight was delayed. He was sitting next to a horrid passenger, and he got slapped, and rude words were said, but the whole thing was made up, and it was just generated for publicity. And it was played out on Twitter. Lots of media organizations fell for it and reported it as true, and here's the Mail online doing a kind of reverse, oh my God, we got it wrong, but don't pay any attention. There was an essay on poverty that was published that prompted a $60,000 in donations until it was revealed by its author to be impressionistic rather than strictly factual. So people had given $60,000 to help somebody who was living in poverty who didn't actually exist. Their creators described these stories as online performance art, never intended to be taken as fact. But media outlets in each case published them. No verification, as far as I can tell, or certainly poor verification. Now, I'm just going to try and take you back to the PowerPoint, if I can. Oops. One of these techie guys like to come and help me for a sec. Just to get me back to my PowerPoint. That's great, thanks. Appreciate it. Okay. So, when the tales that I've described turned out to be phony, the hand-wringing that followed was accompanied by an admission that viral trumps verified, and that little will be done so long as the clicks keep coming. Viral trumps verified. The difference seems to be that the news organisations that publish recent hoax pieces, Gawker, BuzzFeed, the Huffington Post and Mashable are among them, do not see invented viral tales as being at odds with the serious news content they publish alongside them. The Huffington Post won a Pulitzer Prize in 2012. Gawker was among the first to report the cocaine use by Toronto's mayor, and BuzzFeed is building teams of investigative and foreign correspondents. Instead, editors at these sites acknowledge frankly that there are trade-offs in balancing authenticity with the need to act quickly in a hyper-connected age. We are dealing with a volume of information that is impossible to have the strict standards of accuracy that other institutions have. That's a quote from John Cook, the editor-in-chief of Gawker. Ryan Grimm, who's an executive at the Huffington Post, said the faster metabolism puts people who fact-check at a disadvantage. If you throw something up without fact-checking it, and you're the first one to put it up, and you get millions and millions of views, and later it's proved false, you've still got those views. That's a problem. The incentives are wrong. But others say that readers can tell which content is serious and which is taken from the web without vetting. We assume a certain level of sophistication and skepticism of our readers, is an oft-reported quote that I've heard. So are you, and are we at the BBC, for example, prepared to lower standards of verification for the sake of clicks? Currently, at the BBC, the answer is no. But the pressure is growing, and it is holding us back, whether we like it or not. Some would say the growth of data journalism is a help, not a hindrance to this question. The ability of us all to fact-check online through reams of official data. But who has the time? Or the research skills? Data journalism, done well, remains a specialist niche profession. What makes data journalism different to the rest of journalism? Perhaps it's the new possibilities that open up when you combine the traditional nose for news and the ability to tell a compelling story with the sheer scale and range of digital information that's now available. And those possibilities can come at any stage of the journalist's process, using programming to automate the process of gathering and combining information from local government, police and other civic services, or using software to find connections between hundreds of thousands of documents, as the British Daily Telegraph did with MPs' expenses. And this is that page kind of illustrated. All this stuff is data journalism, which was less about a team of reporters, as they would have done 10 years ago, sifting through MPs' expenses. But they were able to pull out, by entering the right algorithms, the information that they needed to put together graphs and information and topics like this and expose what many people would now describe as the highly corrupt business of British MPs fleecing the taxpayer to build duck ponds in their gardens while claiming it back through their expenses. So data journalism can help a journalist tell a complex story through engaging infographics. There's some of them there, none of which requires a highly skilled graphics team. Hooray! Tick, we save some money. So what are the golden rules for the future digital world? Of course, this is really arrogant for me to say that this is anything other than a personal view. It's current only at the time that I'm speaking. It'll probably change tomorrow. But I thought it would be helpful to kind of close with these thoughts. Compelling content comes first. Without this, you are nothing. You are dead in the water. Great writing, including succinct words and phrases that will support your great content. A vision for how your story will work digitally, whether it has the right Google juice or search engine optimization, if you like. Strong visuals, really, really important. They could be still or they could be video, but they've got to be strong all the time and they've got to be consistent. Shareability, whether you're on social media or elsewhere. It is the equivalent of the conversations that I'm sure you used to have 20 or 30 years ago when you might go to school and talk about last night's TV because more or less everyone was watching the same program on TV. Well, now it's the business of making what you found shareable with your circle of friends. And the last point is really kind of the most crucial, I think, after content. I still believe that content is king. But after that, without shareability, your digital strategy is a non-runner. You must generate page impressions. You have got to generate clicks, likes, shares. And that's how, in my opinion, big media organizations avoid evolving into dinosaurs. And we all know what happened to them. Thank you. So the sandwiches are still virtually untouched. It might be a good time to make a grab for the highly recommended smoked salmon, or the beer, or the wine. And please feel free to ask me questions, because I shall stand here until you do. Otherwise, I'll have to ask myself questions, which will be really embarrassing. Okay, I'll ask you a question then. Do you think that, I mean, that model that's very much UK-centred, does that feel like what's happening in Austria? Or not? No? Just say yes or no. I'd just be interested in a view.
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Does it feel like it's going very fast and you're losing your linear audiences, or do you feel that this is a kind of particularly bad thing that's happening in Britain? Because obviously lots of bad things happen in Britain all the time. Does it feel worse? Pretty much the same. That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And one of the kind of conversations that I had 2 or 3 years ago shows how fast this world is spinning. And I was working at Radio 1 at the time. We were doing lots of social media and new media and all that sort of stuff. And I met a guy who was an editor in local radio. And I said, why aren't you on Facebook and Twitter and social? Why don't you do anything at all in social media? And he said, oh, our audiences aren't interested in any of that nonsense. They'll never be into that. They're all too old and stupid. It was a bit of a strange view. 3 years ago, no one would say that now. No one. And every single local radio station that I'm in charge of the ones in England, and they're all on social media. They're all on Facebook. They're all on Twitter. They're all providing visual content. They're all they've got reporters who tweet first before they report on the radio. They've got reporters who take pictures on their iPhones and it's normal business. 3 years ago, that was anathema to the editor that I spoke to then. So look how fast it all changes, and where will we be in 3 years' time?
I have a question. You were discussing your points of arguments were very strongly related to an editorial content,
Yes.
or let's say a journalist perspective.
Yeah.
My strong belief still is that the buying decision in radio is not the editorial content, it's the music. And there you have other disruptors.
Yeah.
not the ones you mentioned.
But it's exactly the same.
Yes.
It's exactly the same. The music is editorial content. It's just editorial content on a music station. And the music stations are being attacked by the digital offering. In Britain, the biggest source of music used to be Radio 1. That's where you would go to find new music. Now it's YouTube. I mean, there are other players as well, as we all know, with Spotify and so on and so forth. But no longer is it commercial radio or the BBC in the form of Radio 1 that is the place that you find new music content. So everything I've said about journalism relates just as much to any other editorial content that we analog or linear broadcasters might provide, whether it's music policy, whether it's drama, documentaries, you name it, everything. You are being disrupted digitally, and in the UK the picture is it's happening rapidly, and the decline is rapid, and the erosion of audiences is rapid.
But the answers might be different to the different kind of disruptors. On the journalist side,
Yeah.
you had a lot of answers, but
Sure.
I think on the music side, there might be other answers, or to how to cope with.
Absolutely, and I, as I said, at the end, I'm no expert in avoiding disaster. What I think we all need to be able to do is to have some sort of plan, digital plan for our media, whatever it is and wherever you are, about what you do about it. So, for example, if you're running a chain of music stations, who's killing me now? And if they're killing me, how can I fight back? And if I can't fight back on their terms, how do I change the game so that I can win on my terms? And those are the kind of discussions and the thoughts that I think we need to be all having in our separate and different ways, if that makes sense. But I don't have the answer for you. I wish I was able to say, well, I think, in Vienna you need to do this, and Innsbruck, no. I think you're the guys who have the answers, but you need to understand what the problem is first, and that's, I think, what we've tried to do in the UK.
I think the disaster is already there, because facing the ratings by age, you will see that, for example, the average time spent listening among 14 to 19 is a quarter of the total average of the audience. It means 50 minutes to nearly 200 minutes. So they grow up in just another media world. And I don't have the answers. I'm sorry to say.
No, that's exactly right. Radio 1 used to have a kind of, among that target audience, that young audience you describe, it used to deliver 20 minutes time spent at breakfast, and now it delivers about 6 or 7 minutes. So it's tough.
So we are in a fine position with 50 minutes.
You're in a much I don't know, but my impression is it's not as bad in Austria as it is in the UK and America. But I'm not an expert, as I say. It's coming your way, even if it's not. It will be like this.
But still, you were talking already yesterday on this question a little bit. My impression is that the questions you're formulating,
Yes.
in some sense, I always miss the second half.
Right.
Because the second half for me would be, you're saying I'm losing acceptance at the end. You're losing acceptance, so you're losing customers. And I would ask why, because now the old media actually are not telling the customers or the public what they should hear, how they should hear, and so on. Now we have an inversion of the situation. The technology and the self-determination of even very young customers are telling you, I look for my news on using other technology, using other methods, and I don't need this 3-page analysis. I need the header, and then I will decide if I will look for more information on it or not. So for me, the question, the second half of the question would be, do you want to again reach these customers you are losing? Because then you have to go to them and give them your news with your quality in a way they are looking for or accepting. So you understand, they are always talking about I'm losing, but you're not, how can I gain them again?
Well, there was a part in my presentation where I was talking about how Newsbeat on Radio 1 has evolved from being a radio news service to effectively a digital and social media service. And I did that. And that was in direct response to loss of audience. So it will be a different model for everyone. And I would be arrogant, as I keep saying, to say, well, what you need to do is X, Y, and Z. But what I could see happening was that people didn't want to listen to the radio. Because if you're young, the radio is bloody boring, frankly. There are no pictures, and why should I? So what you've got to do, if you're at the really boring end of popular radio, which is that you're supplying a 15-minute news program, and you've tried everything you possibly can to make it sexy and interesting and compelling to audiences, and they still don't want it, you provide what they do want in the way that they want it. So we redesigned a website which was entirely visual, based on video. We converted all the radio journalists into TV journalists, effectively into TV journalists, actually online visual journalists. I don't like the idea of TV journalists. TV journalists are dead. Nobody cares about TV journalism anymore. What you want is journalists with visual skills and radio skills and online skills who can be platform friendly to wherever their market is taking them. So does it work? Radio 1 has a online reach and a YouTube reach that is rapidly catching up with its declining old-fashioned radio use. In local radio, where I now work, we have 7 million people listening to local radio, but we have 10 million people consuming us online. And we've changed, therefore, from being a radio-only service into, a genuinely multimedia with a very difficult audience to win over, because these are older people and they're working class people, so they're less likely to have, iPads and all the rest of it. But it can be done. That's what I'm saying. What you need to do is know your audience first so you can make that connection. But it absolutely works. And I do have the answer for those two bits of the media that I worked in. The problem the kind of big BBC News website has is that it comes at things in a BBC. We are the BBC. We're serious and we're very good, and they are. And we get it right, and you can trust us. Way. But those are things that in the digital world are a bit stuffy and old-fashioned. So what can BBC News do to take on and beat some of the competitors? And I cited BuzzFeed as an example of that. Now I think a lot of BuzzFeed's content is rubbish. It's lists. Top 20 this and top 20 that. However, people like it. So what is there that from BuzzFeed, without being a direct lift, that the BBC News website could do that understands how that stuff is shareable and interesting to newer modern audiences? And I believe you will see the BBC fight back on this score in the coming months and years. Because there's a real understanding of what we need to do. Mobile comes first. As I said at the beginning, it's really, really important that people understand you've got to work on a mobile device. This is where the battleground is. This one. If you're not on that, you're not winning on that, you're a loser.
I've got a question concerning the target of BBC's digital strategy. Is it the first target to reach a bigger audience, no matter which channel is being used? Is it radio, is it TV, is it online? Or is it the first target to use the online strategy to make them listen more to the radio again?
No, I don't think anyone thinks that we'll convert people into listening to the radio again or more. People like radio and people will listen to the radio, particularly people who are better educated and slightly older. But what we have to stop doing is being so platform specific all the time and stop going on about, we must improve our radio, we must improve our TV. No, what you want to do is have great content which is fantastic and works on different platforms, the platforms the ones that we know and the ones that are yet to be invented, where we will need to win. So that's really what it's all about. So it's not the old-fashioned thing of saying, oh my God, the radio figures are going down, the TV figures are going down, we've got to get them back up again. What we're saying is, we've got great content and we want people to consume our content. At the end of the day, it probably matters less if it's on YouTube and more if it says BBC.
And as you mentioned, YouTube, if I understood it right, BBC Radio 1 is starting on Monday its own iPlayer channel.
Yes.
Video channel. What will be the big difference between the YouTube channel of BBC Radio 1 and the iPlayer channel?
Well, a lot of the content will be exactly the same. Because, well, why do it? Because people are not platform specific. So, you know, there will be a group of people who will go to iPlayer and watch that Taylor Swift interview or whatever it is. But there will be some people who don't know about iPlayer, didn't hear about it, and they're on YouTube watching Taylor Swift. The point is, as I said earlier, content has got to be out there. It's not about the platform it's on. We can't be snobby about the platform we're on. What we've got to have is our great content being consumed and shared by people in the real world.
I have one remark. I really disagree that the situation in Austria is the same. I think we are kind of in a lucky position that we are 5 years, 10 years behind.
Great.
the US.
Lucky you.
And especially if you look at the print decline, it's not that
Yeah.
that problematic as it is in the US. The local news at the ORF, they reach up to 50% market share, which is,
Yeah.
I think, unbelievable for other public broadcasters in Europe and so on. And so I have one question concerning the BBC online content. Do you have certain regulations, for example, for BBC World or for your content you put online?
Yeah.
Like the ORF is only allowed to put content online which kind of refers to its own program. This is so.
Yeah.
Can you do it only online story as well, or are there any regulations?
Yeah, there are, and there, as you would expect with, you know, some of the bureaucracy that goes with these things, and the BBC there's a lot of broadcasting bureaucracy in Britain. It's not as easy as it should be. And people are frustrated on a daily basis that they can't update their website in the way that they'd like, and that they can't put all the content where they'd like at whatever time they would like. However, things are getting better, you know, the thing that drives the BBC, in fairness to the BBC, and why it is, I believe, still a great organisation, is that we care about audiences wherever they are, and we care about our content being good and right. And you know, some of those kind of conflicts with the Huffington Post and so forth are interesting for that reason. So we're not prepared to go that far, but we need to be more fleet of foot, I think, in general. I think that's a fair criticism. And we need to break through the bureaucracy when we can. I mean, I won't bore you with stories of broadcasting bureaucracy, but that you're right, it exists, and sometimes it is a disruptor just as much as the digital disruptors that we talked about. Smoked salmon is still available.
As you're now in one big newsroom together at the new broadcasting house in the centre of London, what's been the biggest advantage and the biggest disadvantage of coming together, BBC Radio 1, Radio 2,
Yeah.
online departments all in one place now?
I think you know, the BBC employs 5,000 journalists, which is an astonishing number of journalists when you think about it. It's the largest news organisation in the world, and putting most of them, not all of them, but most of them in the same building is a help, because you get people talking to each other in a way that didn't happen. So what sometimes you get is, there's a kind of running story at the moment in Britain about whether at some point in the 1970s there was a paedophile ring that was very close to the centre of power. These are allegations. and how far up the chain it went and who was involved and all the rest of it. And what is going on at the BBC is that there are several journalists working on it. In the old BBC, I don't think any one of them would have known that the other one was working on this story. But actually, this allows us to kind of pool information in a sensible way about, you know, who's ringing who and what we're doing to chase this down and how we're standing it up and, you know, what the legal problems, and there are many, are around this sort of story. So it's one example of how scale helps when you're all together. And there are conversations that take place between editors that would never have happened. And again, cross-platform conversations. So you have online talking to a radio editor and a radio talking to TV. So people are breaking out of their straitjacket of what their label says and actually having sensible conversations. So those are the pluses. I think some of the minuses, well, everyone's got a moan, whether it's to do with the coffee machine or the lack of microwaves in the building or whatever it is. But leaving aside the trivial stuff, I think that there are more positives than negatives.
How do you organize, you mentioned this kind of cooperation between different journalists researching
Yeah.
on this story. How do you manage that those people find each other?
Yeah.
Is there something like, I just know the Guardian news list,
Yes.
which is even online publicly, so
Well, yeah, I mean, some of this stuff we wouldn't want to make public because clearly it would give our competitors an advantage to know that we were working on story X or story Y. I don't think it's any great. What I've just told you tonight is no particular secret. It's the fact that there was allegedly some sort of paedophile ring at the top of British politics or near the top of British politics in some shape or form is not a state secret. But how it works, to answer your question, is that there is a kind of unit which operates closely connected to the head of BBC News, which tries to pull all these things together. So you have to share information. So the quid pro quo of that is that an editor with a big story needs to declare his hand in a relatively confidential way to these colleagues, and then that kind of factors in, and then you can see, oh, through honesty, as it were, we're getting to a place where we've got 2 or 3 people working on more or less the same story. The other good example of it was that, forgive me if this is too UK parochial, but there was allegedly a plot in the UK by among a group of Muslim schools in Birmingham to Islamify those schools, to effectively push out the kind of traditional, if you like, British teaching methods and turn them into Islamic-only schools, and therefore effectively break the rules of state education. And the plot was predicated on Muslim governors taking over these school governing bodies, voting out non-Muslims, sacking the head teacher and putting in a Islamist head teacher in the school, and therefore changing the whole culture of the school. So it was not just in one school, but it was in this area of Birmingham, Britain's second city. And it was a big story. You know, was there really a plot, or was it just a couple of rogue schools operating this way off their own back? And obviously it feeds into the whole story of Britain and Afghanistan and ISIS and all the other things that we all know are happening. Now, the BBC worked together on that story, both in terms of the local radio station, the local regional television station, UK nationally, reporters nationally, and so forth. And we got better, in the end, we got better coverage because we worked together. So there's another example. Bit long-winded, sorry about that. Okay, another one.
I want to bring in another digital disruption.
Yeah.
we're talking on the content disruptions, but there's also an important one on the distribution side. The
Yes.
Digital disruption, digital radio. This question is of big interest for us because Austria, in that respect, is not a late mover. It's up to now a no mover concerning digital, and there are good reasons behind.
Yep.
I think it's and it's there's no difference between public radio in Austria and the big private radio stations in Austria, which are very skeptic on that. So in Europe, the UK is
Yeah.
always the big example of having the best technological
Yeah.
diffusion in digital radio measured by
Yeah.
a receiver number, a relative number of
Yep.
receivers and things like that. But it's still soaking.
Yeah.
The business models
Yeah.
don't work. And or to cut it short, in my opinion, this will suck because it's still a one-way
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
And terrestrial digital radio, and it
Yeah.
will not really survive, and it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
compared to IP-based radio.
Yeah.
Based radio. So, what is your experience or opinion on that
Yeah.
in the UK? Because there are some radio stations, not the big players, which try to make a test, a digital
Yeah.
ID, a V plus test digital radio here in
Yeah.
Austria, and
Yeah.
I'm skeptic.
Okay. So in the UK, it was DAB that was our digital platform, and when DAB started up, lots of people, well, quite a lot of people, not lots of people, quite a lot of people rushed out and bought DAB radios, and they were typically posh people, wealthy people, well-educated people, most of whom wanted to listen to Radio 4, which is the upmarket speech channel in the UK. It was very, very unattractive and not bought at all by younger audiences. Why? Because it's just a radio. It's a box. Who would want? Look what I've been given, a radio. Fantastic. You know, it's just doesn't happen if you're young. So DAB never took off with that part of its audience, the music part of the audience, the young, the Radio 1 audience, commercial radio, no, you know, it just wasn't anywhere. We weren't helped by the fact that it wasn't in cars. And when it was in cars, it was in new posh cars, which only posh people would drive for at least 6 or 7 years. Therefore, there was kind of no penetration. There is no appetite, in my opinion, controversially, for younger audiences to rush out and buy DABs. And I think the industry is not, as a result, he says controversially, in a happy place. We know what younger audiences want. They want to be able to consume that sort of content on this. So, you know, I've got iPlayer radio on here. I don't know whether it'll work. I can try, but this is the way that if you did want to listen to radio content, and obviously I've never tried to do this in Austria before, that this is going to cost a fortune in data charges may apply. Yeah, I know.
Annie, come on.
It works.
Give some cash. He went,
Okay, so
what's the number? You can take the boy out of Blackpool. The number is
why would I want a
70705.
DAB radio when I can go to Austria and listen to Radio 1 like that? Obviously, it'll cost me an absolute fortune, but who cares? And I slightly got off topic there, but you know, in a way, it's kind of illustrative of why DAB radio is not a sexy piece of kit. It is just a box in your room with quite nice but not fantastic sound. And why would you want it, really, when you can get that in the UK on this and this, and that, and anything, and your tablet.
So you think, especially for young listeners, strategy to enforce digital radio is the wrong one?
Any strategy to enforce anything, it sounds terrifying and is doomed to failure in my view, especially with a rebellious lot of people in the UK who are young. But yes, is the short answer to your question.
I've got another question concerning your past with BBC Radio 1 Newspeed.
Yeah.
BBC Radio 1 Newspeed is an extraordinary news program
Yeah.
because it always used to work with a lot of audio production elements like stings and music beds and playing real music and a lot of cross promotion to online votings, etc., etc. Did it do any good for holding the listeners?
It did in its time, yeah. And at the time, we only ever did anything because it worked. And we discovered about 15 years ago, I did some quite expensive research, which discovered that our listeners had a 3-second attention span, which is not a bad thing, but it just meant that if we were boring for 3 seconds, they would switch off. Not necessarily literally, but zone out. So we then tried to work out whether it was possible to be exciting all the time. And so that we would never be boring for, maybe we'd be boring for 2 seconds, but not for 3. So that's why we did lots of stings and production devices. There was always something to listen to. And then we tested it with the audience, and they did actually like it. And they said, we like what you do, and it makes us listen, and we understand what you're on about, which is more than other people do. Where we are now, 15 years on, I think that stuff is becoming much less important. It's still there, and it still works well, but it's an evolving thing. I can't speak for the current management of Newsbeat, but I mean, I would imagine that a lot more effort will go to online, go to YouTube, go and hit this on your mobile, than 10 or 15 years ago, where we were saying, how can we make the sexiest jingles ever that make people want to listen forever and not be bored? Okay, another. You got you.
One last digital disruption. It's concerning one of the USP of radio, which of course is traffic news in cars. That's the USP of radio. What I feel and I see is in 10 years from now, no one will need traffic news in radio. We will be outbeaten by car industry, a coalition of car industry, navigation system providers, traffic infrastructure industry, by the Google driverless cars. Radio is not even involved in this kind of talks. They do not even try to get into or to stay into where they are right now. And this is still one of the reasons the time spent listening radio, the highest share is in car.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. My own personal view is that what we used to think of as being, in the UK, in local radio, we used to call them, we still do, utilities. The utility services, your weather, your travel, whether the local school's closed, things like that. Those utilities are becoming less and less important for audiences because there are more and different ways of getting them. Why would I need to listen to the weather on the radio in the morning when, I have an app that tells me when I wake up, without having even to switch the radio on, BBC Weather, here we are, and there are thousands of them. And this tells me that in Vienna tonight, the minimum nighttime temperature is 11 degrees and there's light cloud. There it is. So, why would I? Sorry?
People like reassurance. They want to look out of the window and hear somebody saying it's raining.
Well, exactly. But increasingly, people are not doing that, and they're not. It's not the weather forecast that they're after. It's not the travel news that they're after from their radio, because they think, well, I've heard that I mean, I've got that. It's on my phone, and you know, and there's a travel update on my phone which tells me if my road is closed and where the roadworks are. So you know, your relationship with the radio changes again. So I agree with you. It's not an Armageddon thing, which I was kind of saying before. You know, that we're suddenly going to wake up one morning and no one will listen to the radio ever again, and we're all dead, or the television, or whatever it is. But it is happening, and we need to be to understand that. Now, you see, I would argue that one of the clever things the BBC's done are the two apps I've just shown you. One, that they've got a really good weather app, which tells me what the weather is in Vienna, and that they've given me the ability to listen to Radio 1 in Vienna on my phone. So it's content on there. Mobile comes first. Remember what I said? Mobile comes first. That's the thing. And so it matters less about what you're doing on the radio if the content is there.
But how can you transfer this strategy if you don't have your business model being funded by totally funded? So if you
sure,
you can afford to invest in that, because you don't have to monetize it.
And I totally appreciate that. And I would never say anything other than the BBC is in a very fortunate position to be an extremely well-funded, not a state broadcaster, but a public broadcaster. And you know, the license fee, which is, you know, roughly 150 euros a year, which most of the British public don't like paying because they think it's poll tax, we think is very good value. Is a big hot topic at the next election in the UK. You know, should there be a license fee? Probably yes. Will it be smaller than it is now? Probably yes. What will that do to the BBC? Quite a lot more disruption. And you know, where does that take us? It's interesting stuff. But at the moment, and I accept, we're able to do things in R&D and future media and across the board that commercial rivals would bite their hands off to do. You know, in a way, I'm sorry about that, but in another way, some of this stuff can give you models for things that you can scale and do in your own world, I hope. Okay. I think we've probably exhausted the whole thing. I just wanted to say, you know, thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you in German. And it's been a pleasure being here. And I hope you found it sort of 10% useful. And that will be a good thing for me. And thanks for inviting me, and thanks for having me. And I feel really sorry for the sandwiches.